What's the most awkward situation you've witnessed where an attempt to be funny just went absolutely wrong? My newest boss at the time had accidentally brushed my butt with her hand and said sorry I didn't mean to. I didn't have my work filter on, so I naturally teased her a little with a wink and a shore. She got really flustered and uncomfortable. I don't think it had anything to do with me, but a week later she quit. I don't think it had anything to do with me, but a week later she quit, says the guy with the deposition. Was woken up at 2 AM by the doorbell. Took a little while to become conscious and actually realize it was the doorbell, by which time my wife was awake as well. I go down to see who it is. It's a neighbor. As soon as I open the door, he tells me there is a fire next door. Next door is a building site and a small digger was currently ablaze. Slightly concerning as gas canisters were stored on the site. I rush back upstairs and my wife has looked out the window and could see the fire right outside. We decide to evacuate. The neighbor offers to let us stay in his house across the road to await the fire brigade. Neighbor and his wife are lovely and very welcoming. Fire brigade turns up very quickly and put it out. As we are thanking the neighbor, he apologizes for waking us up. I respond with, well, at least it wasn't Jehovah's Witnesses. He smiles but doesn't respond, and me and my wife head back indoors. As the door clicks shut, my wife hisses at me, "They are Jehovah's Witnesses." I then cringe a lot. Let's just hope it was one of those self-aware kinda ironic Jehovah's Witnesses. I've only tried to use yo mama jokingly twice in my entire life. Both times, the person's mother had died unbeknownst to me. A girl had what looked like a little spot of bean dip on her upper lip, and I jokingly said that she kinda looked like Hitler. She started crying. Turns out it was a permanent scar that happened recently. Another time I saw a girl crying at a party, and I just said, "Hey, it's okay. Guys are dongs." It was kinda my go-to before this when I saw crying girls at parties, and it usually cheered them up. Turns out her boyfriend just died in a car crash. So anyway, that's why I never talk to people anymore. Another time I saw a girl crying at a party, and I just said, "Hey, it's okay. Guys are dongs." It was kinda my go-to before this when I saw crying girls at parties, and it usually cheered them up. Turns out her boyfriend just died in a car crash. Hey, you're better off without him, anyway. Sobbing increases. Whoa, I hope he felt really bad. Sobbing gets hysterical. I was at a party, and a girl behind me was talking with a mouthful of food. I couldn't understand her, so I said, "I could have sworn I just heard one of the adults from Charlie Brown." A few people laughed, and I didn't think much about it. Later on, the host of the party told me that she has a speech impediment. I'd have a speech impediment too if I talked with food in my mouth. Source: bad person. During my first ever interview for a job, my would-be boss asked me, "Have you ever been convicted of a crime?" At this point, all the questions had been straightforward and all my answers had been as well. I decided that it was necessary to show off my charismatic side by telling a joke, and decided that there was no better time than right there as a response to his question. I said, "Well, I was once arrested for attempted murder." Interviewer: "Wait, what? Me? Yeah, I had 2 crows and was trying to get a third." I looked at him expecting him to somehow just get that a group of crows is called a murder of crows. I did not get the job. This guy I work with showed us a picture of a buff shirtless dude on a motorcycle and said, "This is what I want to be one day." So I said, "Wow, it's going to take you a long time to turn yourself into a motorcycle," and he gave me the most evil look. It was around other co-workers as well, and only a few people laughed about it. It was so awkward with how offensive he took the joke. So a friend was trying to talk to this girl who is Asian, and it was a complete car crash and was really painful to watch. Then as a last ditch attempt he goes, "Do you wanna hear a joke?" So she goes, "Okay then." So he goes, "My Japanese peeps I call my geeps." Her: "How is that funny?" Him: "It's not meant to be." And there was then the most awkward cringiest moment you could imagine. Where was he even going with that? It was early in the season and my coach didn't really know everyone's name and background. Us kids knew each other pretty well. However, we began practice and he noticed our motivation was low and we kinda moped through the drills, even the fun ones. Halfway through practice he finally said, "Come on guys, what's wrong? You all look like your mothers just died." Well, turns out a week ago one of our teammates' mother had died of cancer, leaving her devastated family behind. So yeah, that was pretty awkward. That is extremely unlucky. When we were young kids, whenever we asked my mom what was cooking for dinner, she'd reply, "Your underwear, lol." So one day my stepdad is standing in the doorway, distracted by something on TV, and my sister asks what smells so good and he quickly replies, "Your underwear," trying to be funny. He still hasn't lived that one down. Freaking unfortunate. One of my close friends as a teenager, her older brother had an inoperable tumor in his brain. It was bad. Her family was a bit religious, so they held a prayer thing for him at a local church and I was invited. I was incredibly socially anxious at the time and her family always intimidated me. Like, her mother was pretty judgmental and hard to please, so I was crazy nervous about attending this. Just so much pressure. I show up, I pray with everybody. I'm not even sure how one prays exactly, but I did my best. And at one point we're all supposed to write down little notes of encouragement and hope to her brother. Oh god, too much pressure. I can't think of anything to write. I'm that person who goes for a simple happy birthday on a card instead of a personal message. So I jot down "hope you don't die" and draw a kitty next to it. Dropped it in the box. Go home. A few weeks later, my friend calls me, yelling, "Why did you write that?" And I can't even give her a good answer other than some stammered excuse about bringing levity to a heavy situation. I did the opposite. Her mom apparently read it and freaked the heck out. The cancer was pretty advanced at that point, so talking about death was way too freaking real. I did not help make myself more likable in her family's eyes, that's for sure. Good news is, he survived and is fine now. Obviously your note worked. My brother, cousins, and I used to pretend curse because we weren't allowed to actually curse around our parents. We would say things like, "Suck my dick," long pause, "Shianery." Our parents would complain and we would say, "I was just saying dictionary." That's not a curse. Obviously, the only way for it to work is to end the sentence with the curse word. My cousins were joking around during Christmas dinner. One of them said, "Shut up and put your dong in my mouth." He meant to end his sentence with the curse word so he could expand it into dictionary, but got mixed up. His face was priceless. He just said, "Dictionary, dictionary." I meant dictionary. That was over 20 years ago and we still make fun of him for that. A few months after the space shuttle exploded in 1986, we had an assembly at our school from the folks at NASA or some such. We knew there was gonna be a Q&A after and we started goading our pal into raising his hand and telling one of the many space shuttle jokes that had been going around for months. Specifically, this one: how many astronauts can fit in a Volkswagen? 2 in front, 2 in back, and 7 in the ashtray. Q&A comes up and we are needling Buddy. "Come on, man, raise your hand." Well, he finally did, but he either chickened out or couldn't tell a joke to save his life. He asked how many astronauts can fit in a car. We are already laughing. The lecturer either has been living under a rock or was unfamiliar with the jokes because he straightforwardly asked how many. Weird pause. 7. That's it. The rest of the school didn't laugh. Actually, there was this weird, deflating feeling that happened. The instructor wrapped it up. The teacher glared at my pal. He got detention. This is my favorite in this thread. This happened to me yesterday. My younger cousin had spent the majority of our beach vacation playing video games in the game room of the house we rented. The house was enormous and it was easy to get turned around with several floors and bedrooms. We had about 20 people staying in the house. After several days of pestering him to come out and enjoy the beach family, I had it in my mind to open up the game room door quickly and yell boo. Well, I did, and it wasn't the game room. It was my mom's friend struggling to get out of her wet bathing suit. She screamed and hit her hip on the dresser, leaving a nasty bruise. I'm mortified to say the least. This result is funnier than the intended result. I broke my back 12 weeks prior and was still pretty sick and wheelchair bound. So I was out with a group of friends whom I hadn't seen since the accident. They asked where do you want to sit, I simply deadpanned and went I can sit wherever. I thought it was funny but a few of them went white as the wall. But that was funny, I laughed. We were at a church wedding where the minister felt the need to tell what he thought was an amusing story during his sermon. He talked about a wedding where everyone else was ready to go except for the groom, who didn't show up. Turns out that he was found on the course with his one true love, golf. The bride was furious and interrupted his sermon to say that she felt his so-called humor was inappropriate and to please get on with the ceremony. Choosing the right officiant is an overlooked aspect of wedding planning. I'm a criminal defense trial attorney. While doing jury selection, I was questioning a potential black juror I wanted to keep. I asked hypotheticals regarding how she decided which of her kids were telling the truth, assessing credibility. She said she doesn't. She just punishes them all. So I jokingly asked, so you just punish them both? Put them in a corner? Throw them under a bus? Hang me from a tree? I just moved on. No idea where that came from. This reminds me of my Cringeyest moment. I was working in a daycare and for whatever dumb reason, me and the other girl in the room started saying we were going to sell each other down the river. Later, one of the moms came in, asked where her baby was, and I said, we sold her down the river, which is not a great thing to say to a black woman. Went on a ski trip with my class. I'm a teacher, and 3 other classes. Some of the kids got sick so we had to move some of them so they could stay in one room instead of making other kids sick. We made some signs for the toilets because you could never see if they were occupied, so you could just turn around the sign to occupied and turn it back when you were done. We had one kid sitting on the toilet vomiting and one of my students came around the corner and tried to open the door, which was locked. A teacher from another class asked him pretty loudly if he was too dumb to read the sign. My student, who is dyslexic BTW, just started crying and everybody around him just stood there and didn't know what to say. That's a crappy thing for a teacher to say to a kid, dyslexic or not. Oh god, so I work in broadcasting and this producer thought it'd be hilarious, in the middle of a crowded office, to stand behind a girl who was working for him, and thrust his pelvis into her bottom whilst she was leaning over talking to someone who was sitting down. Horrifically inappropriate. They did not have that sort of relationship and this guy had a terrible reputation in the office. A colleague stood up and just went mental at him. Dave, what the frick are you doing? He sort of sheepishly realized what he'd done, apologized and walked out of the area quickly. Later he brought his victim aside and apologized. She accepted. Damn it, Dave. My ex-girlfriend had made a new friend at university and wanted to go out to town with her, so I called up my mate and we all went out together. While we were in the pub, I made a joke about incest. I can't quite remember what the joke was, but it made sense with the story. My mate laughed, but my ex and her new friend were stone silent. My phone vibrates about a minute later. I check it to see a text from my then girlfriend. The text read, her parents are cousins, you freaking idiot. Needless to say, it was an awkward night. I told a co-worker I had just picked my wedding dress and that it was white even though I had been looking at blush dresses. She is 60ish YO and I am 27. She then told me I could get a blush dress for my second wedding. I thought it was a joke and laughed and told her I plan on staying married to my fiance. She looked me straight in the eyes with pain in them and said my first husband died a few years after we got married. And that was it. I didn't know how to respond or how to move forward with the conversation, so we just went different ways. Awkward. What a weird, rude thing to say. Well, you can wear pink when the person you love most in the world is worm food. I was at a suicide awareness function where there was a local band playing music. The lead singer almost dropped his guitar and said, "Oh, my guitar just tried to commit suicide." Yep, not many people laughed. That's freaking hilariously bad timing. It's about 2012 to 2013. I was at the bar with some buddies smoking outside. Older dude has a wheezing cough, and it's really rough. Takes a second to recover. He kind of announces, "Sorry, haven't been the same since 9/11. My friends and I awkwardly and politely laugh as his 9/11 joke, thinking he coughed because he was a smoker. He turns to us and with all seriousness says, "I guess y'all are too young to remember." We weren't too young. I thought it was a crap joke that he dropped on us and we reacted. I quickly realized dude has a New York accent. We were in TX and was wearing a firefighter shirt. TLDR. We laughed at a 9/11 first responder thinking it was a regular guy making a crappy joke. We were all embarrassed to say the least. I work in a small, very close-knit office. Last week, we received a phone call at my firm for an advisor who suddenly passed away a couple of years ago. I said no, I'm sorry, he's no longer here. He passed away. The caller, a wholesaler, said oh he's busy, I'll call back later. I replied, thinking he wasn't listening or paying attention, and repeated my previous statement. The wholesaler then replies sorry, that was my dry attempt at humor. Definitely cringed after that and made the call extremely awkward. My pregnant wife and I were at a wedding reception and were talking to a friend of ours we hadn't seen in a few years. She was complimenting my wife on her baby bump and I jump in trying to be funny. You can have it if you want. I don't really want another one to deal with. Too much work. She awkwardly smiled and kept on talking to my wife. Little did I know that she had a miscarriage less than a month prior. Egg on my face. An ex-girlfriend played pink fluffy unicorns on her phone while we sat outside with her mom and her mom's new boyfriend. At full blast. Nobody laughed. They just had this annoyed look at their faces. She continued playing it for at least 1 minute and sang along. She was 19 at the time. I just wanted to die. I can see why she's an ex. Guy at school told me your mum a joke. I told him my mum was dead. My mum was not dead. It was an hilarious joke. The guy thought I was for real. Told his mum and that evening his mum calls my house to offer condolences. My mum answers. In college I took Greek myth as a gen ed. Probably about 400 people in it. The professor asked the class why we thought women were depicted the way they were by the ancient Greeks. Couple people offer their perspectives, and the kid directly behind me stands up and quotes South Park. Because they didn't trust something that bleeds for 7 days and doesn't die. You could hear a pin drop as the professor berated him for saying the single most offensive thing he had heard in his 20+ year career. The kid sat down saying to his friend, guess he didn't find that funny. Awful douche chills. Didn't witness it, I caused it. Walked out of middle school one day and over to two friends who were waiting for the buses to arrive. They both were standing there not talking, which was odd for the two usually over talkative teenage girls. Me, trying to lighten up the mood, asked, geez, who died? Turns out the one girl's grandfather had passed away. The look on both of their faces as soon as the words left my mouth will forever be seared into my brain. Co-worker of mine started talking about his wife. We thought it was all positive, which that's how it began, but he turned it around. Started talking about how if a bus would hit her he would start laughing first, then help, or how he wishes she'd moved back to Houston where they used to live and go get another degree and let him live in Louisiana where he lives. It just got worse and worse by the second. I was a cashier at Walgreens and an older gentleman comes to my register with 2 cases of Busch Light. The woman behind him tries to strike up a conversation with him. Here's how it went. Lady, wow, you must be having a party. Man, I'm going fishing. Lady, that sounds fun, just let me know where you're docked at and I'll make my way over there. Man, completely ignores her. Lady tries to awkwardly play it off by laughing and asks me, are you even old enough to sell alcohol? Me, yes. So your total is gonna be XXXX. Oh man, I cringe hard. At the where my 5-year-old cousin had previously passed away, my whole family was there, crying about her sudden death. After a few hours my grandma announces we can all go to her house for sloppy joes. That was my favorite thing my grandma cooked and without thinking I screamed yes with a huge smile on my face. It was really uncomfortable after I realized what I had just done. After my grandpa's funeral earlier this year, we all went back to the church to get some food. It was all laid out. My cousin and I ran to the front of the line to load up our plates and my cousin lets out, oh my god, this is the best day of my life. To be fair, it did break a little of the tension of the day and gave me a much needed laugh. Well, I had a barbecue a week ago where I got naked while in the hot tub. Apparently drunk me thought it would be funny. I also invited co-workers to this event. Haven't been back to work yet as I took last week off as planned PTO. Tuesday should be interesting. I think I am just going to open with so. How many people saw my dong? Classic Robert, California. Told on a different thread. I had a friend who'd been kidnapped and tortured by an ex-boyfriend. He'd sliced up her arms, legs and stomach pretty bad, but she'd gotten over it for the most part, as much as one would expect. Still, when I jokingly yelled "I will cut you" at her at a party, she was not amused. I immediately realized what I'd done and apologized profusely. I assume the other thread was Tifu. Had just got seated for dinner with my wife when the teenage waiter stopped at the table next to us to ask the older couple if they needed anything else. The woman asked for a to-go box and then got up to go to the bathroom. When the waiter came back he said something along the lines of "Here is your box." The husband says no, her box is so much tighter and tastier than this one. It was like time stood still. The waiter had no idea what to do. The old man thought it was funny. The waiter kind of awkwardly left and the wife soon came back to the table. The husband told her what he said. She got really upset and then made the husband apologize to the waiter. The whole thing was just horrible. Felt so bad for that kid. I was in an antique store and they were moving a statue of a Greek warrior made from cast iron. I put on my cheesiest smiles and say to the owner, "Let me give you hand before this thing cripples you." He proceeds to hold up his amputated arm and says about 2 years late. That doesn't actually sound that bad, depending on how he responded. One time 2 of my friends were playfully hitting each other and I jokingly called it domestic violence. Found out later that another girl in the room had been a survivor of domestic abuse. I felt awful, but I sure learned my lesson to not make jokes about that again. You know how sometimes in class when everyone is talking everyone finishes their sentence at about the same time and the whole class just goes quiet and basks in the weirdness of what just happened? That happened to my friend and I, but my friend kept talking. The teacher wasn't in the room and people were talking about how a student was going to beat up a teacher for being racist to the student. Another fun tale. People were talking about how she'd take out the teacher, say all kinds of things, scare and assault her however they could dream up. Lots of little group conversations. Then everyone stopped. But my friend has a knack for talking too much to describe a joke, and comes up with this gem. The chattering grows to a halt. Everyone stops talking, and all you hear is, "Student name, is gonna walk up and slap her with a big fish." He followed with a little giggle from himself and his trademark grin to encourage some supporting laughter, but it was too far gone. No one could mistake his words, nor could he deny he said them. The silence that filled the room was deafening. I think he's gotten over it now. I think I'll go remind him of it. Like every good friend should. My friend, before we were properly friends, looked rather down at a party. Naturally I told her she looked like her dog had died. Turns out it did. Pro tip, don't insult someone who looks sad regardless of why they're sad. Some army recruiters were talking to my high school class about enlisting. They were describing how they don't take anyone and when coming up with examples of inappropriate tattoos, one of them pointed to our foreign exchange student and said, "So if you go out and get a face tattoo of a swastika, you won't be able to join the army." Well, the recruiter didn't know that this kid was from Germany. The whole class went quiet and then burst out laughing, while our teacher informed the recruiter that this student was German. The student took it pretty well, but the other recruiter did most of the talking after the first apologized. First day of a new high school class. Teacher is showing a slideshow of ancient artifacts or something of the sort and then asks the class, "What kinds of skills do you think the crafters of these pieces show with the pottery they made?" Autistic. One smartest kid says loudly, "My son has autism, so let's not say things like that." The teacher responds curtly. Room went silent. I worked McDonald's drive-thru back in high school. Had that "Let Me Love You" song stuck in my head. When a customer pulled up, I answered the headset by saying, "Welcome to McDonald's. How may I love you?" It was me. In high school marching band, one of the drum majors Colin was quite handsome and I had a bit of a crush on him at first. After our big marching competition we were on the buses and the drum majors were taking turns giving their congrats pep talks or whatnot. The first girl started tearing up, so a couple people shouted stuff like "we love you" to help break up the silence. So Colin is giving his little speech and during a pause I decided it would be a great time to shout Colin is my idol because I lack charisma. It just sounded really cringy and creepy. I also said this as my boyfriend was sitting next to me. Nobody laughed and I wanted to curl up and disappear. As my boyfriend was sitting next to me. Bruh. Very recently I was at a wedding in Park Slopes, Utah. After the reception we were all setting up to a sparkler send-off. They had a big all red classic truck with a hay barrel in the back to drive them off to their hotel to get busy. Well, I am walking outside to get my spot in the sparkler send-off line and I jokingly say to my buddy in short breaks in between words, "What are we sending them off to do to be funny?" And he says, "What do people do after their wedding?" And as I start laughing about our sex joke my buddy is moving away from me and points behind me where the bride's dad is right behind us, just bottom lip in the upper lip, saying nothing. Pretty sure the bride's dad knows what is going to be happening and has probably been happening already. Maybe it is Utah after all. Utah. Maybe he's upset he has to share. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.